There's a trope in Doctor Who of the day being saved and the Doctor and their companions quickly leaving in the TARDIS before they're asked to help with the cleanup. It's a trope for a reason. The Doctor very rarely sticks around to see the consequences of their actions. This formed the basis of the classic Tom Baker serial The Face of Evil, in which the Fourth Doctor returned to a planet from his past, only to discover the repairs he made to a computer have created a mad god. However, a lot of the time, we don't get to see these awkward moments for ourselves, due to them probably happening after the Doctor has departed. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie with Who Culture here with 10 awkward things that must have happened after Doctor Who episodes. Number 10. The Post-Saxon General Election. The year is 2008, and the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Harold Saxon, aka the Master, has just assassinated the President of the United States live on national television. Even when time is rolled back in the next episode, this incident has still taken place. How does any country even begin to address the global ramifications of such an insane political situation, let alone two of the most powerful nations in the world? Doctor Who is surprisingly vague on what happens after this extraordinary event. Removing one bad Prime Minister doesn't instantly solve the many problems they created. Many people voted for Harold Saxon, and many politicians attached their wagon to the campaign promises of a megalomaniacal Time Lord. So surely there were several awkward editions of Question Time, where the great and good of the British political establishment discussed what to do next. After all, must not lead an alien invasion and assassinate the US President is a pretty low bar for the next Prime Minister of the UK. Number 9. Who's living at Ace's grandmother's house? The Curse of Fenric sees Ace come to terms with her relationship with her mother Audrey when she encounters her as a baby at a naval base situated near Maiden's Point. Ace also forms an immediate bond with Kathleen Dudman, her maternal grandmother, who she crosses paths with in this serial. As Fenric and the Doctor's final battle reaches its endgame, all hell breaks loose, and Ace ensures that Kathleen and Audrey make it to safety. She gives Kathleen an address that she says is her grandmother's address, where Kathleen and Audrey will be looked after. However, this self-fulfilling prophecy has one flaw, in that it doesn't address whether anyone else is living at the house when Kathleen and Audrey arrive. Kathleen asking the owners of the house for Ace's grandmother would obviously fall on deaf ears, since Kathleen is Ace's grandmother. As a young widow and the mother of a newborn, it's likely that the homeowners would take pity on Kathleen and offer her shelter. However, it doesn't change the fact that the residents of what will become Ace's grandmother's home could easily be the horrible family from The Empty Child who refuse to help anyone but themselves. Number 8. Clara returning the dead boy to his parents. Dark Water and Death in Heaven is one of Stephen Moffat's most misjudged Doctor Who finales. Middling quality aside, Missy's scam to convince humanity to abandon cremation so she can build a cyber army from corpses has likely inflicted all sorts of deep-seated psychological scars on the kids who saw it on broadcast. However, the darkest, most misjudged moment is arguably the happy ending for the poor child shot by Danny Pink in The Line of Duty. Rather than return to Clara as the Doctor intended, Danny uses the technology at his disposal to return the dead child instead. While Clara's link to the TARDIS telepathic circuits likely allowed her to communicate with the young boy, this was still an incredibly awkward position for Danny to put his girlfriend in. She doesn't tell the Doctor that Danny didn't return at the end of Death in Heaven, so how did she transport a child with no passport or travel documents back to the Middle East without the use of a TARDIS? There's surely a whole Big Finish box set in Clara's adventures from her flat in London to the heart of a war zone to return a dead child to a family she's not even sure is still alive. A very strange parting gift to give your girlfriend. Number 7. Mass unemployment in the Pertwee and RTD eras. In both the John Pertwee and Russell T Davies eras of Doctor Who, it was very common for businesses to be the victims of hostile takeovers by enemies of the Doctor. Generally, this would involve key shareholders being eaten by plastic armchairs, gunned down by shop window dummies, or being driven mad by a sentient computer intelligence. Of course, the Doctor eventually defeated the plans of the Autons, Boss, The Wire, Miss Foster, and the rest, but what happened next? After the adipose ship dropped Miss Foster from a great height, or the Master was unmasked and removed from his position at the top of Rex Farrell's plastics company, there must have been a lot of job insecurity. It must have been confusing to arrive at work at the plastics factory on the day after Rex Farrell was shot dead by unit soldiers, and Colonel Masters had disappeared. Was there another key holder to let everybody in? It seemed to be quite a small family firm after all. It's surely no coincidence that the Third Doctor era coincided with mass industrial action in the UK. Too many industries going bust due to being implicated in schemes of world domination. Clearly. Number 6. Explaining the hole in Adam's head. There's nothing worse than having something on your face and not being able to get it off. Bit of ketchup, biro ink, an exposed brain. You know, the usual stuff. Pity poor Adam Mitchell, who opted for a hardware upgrade that outraged the Ninth Doctor and had him unceremoniously dumped from the TARDIS. As Adam was left on contemporary Earth, he didn't have access to the technology that would have made the brain-exposing mechanism on his forehead far less conspicuous. The long game ended with Adam's own mother fainting in horror at her son's upgraded forehead. If even Adam's mother can't love a clanking brain hole, then who can? It also can't be particularly safe or hygienic for your brain to be so openly exposed to the elements every time someone clicks their fingers. Wouldn't that make the wearing of hats or a long fringe slightly problematic, as the material might get caught in the mechanism? Perhaps the best way for Adam to deal with this awkward situation is simply to tell people that it's rude to stare. Number 5. Ian and Barbara explaining Susan's disappearance. We made it! London 1965 is one of the most joyous lines in Doctor Who. Until reality begins to set in, that is. Just how are Ian and Barbara going to explain the disappearance of Susan Foreman to their colleagues at Coal Hill School and the authorities? Ian, Barbara and Susan's disappearance in 1963 can't have gone unnoticed, and surely the two teachers were seen leaving together in the direction of 76 Totters Lane. It's the stuff of a Netflix true crime documentary. Two school teachers follow a girl home, disappear for 2 years and return without the girl. As Ian and Barbara went on to become professors at the University of Cambridge by the time of the Sarah Jane adventures, they had clearly escaped suspicion of wrongdoing. It's miraculous that they did, but the 1960s were a very different time. Maybe they had help from an old friend in smoothing things out. As the 7th Doctor would later return to Totters Lane in remembrance of the Daleks, perhaps he left a very convincing note explaining everything, so that Ian and Barbara could return to London 1965 without being thrown in jail for kidnapping and suspicion of murder. Number 4. Amy, Rory and the Doctor discuss Melody Pond. The Doctor's companions are incredibly forgiving, presumably because the ability to travel in time and space is a pretty decent trade-off for some occasional mistreatment. The most egregious thing that the Doctor largely got away with was when one of his enemies kidnapped the child of Amy and Rory, denying them the chance to be parents and turning their daughter into a killing machine. When the Doctor realises the woman he's been snogging all this time is actually the adult daughter of his companions, he makes a few glib remarks, then leaves in the TARDIS. Months later, he drops out of the sky again, takes everyone to see Hitler, and tells Amy and Rory they'll never be reunited with their baby. However, it's fine because their teenage tearaway friend Mel's was their daughter all along. Given how angry Amy was at the Doctor for abandoning her as a child, it's very odd that she let him off the hook for the Melody/River debacle. So surely there was a lot of raised voices and awkward conversations once the TARDIS left Nazi Germany. Number 3. Informing Aunt Vanessa's relatives about her fate. Informing relatives of a tragedy is something that no police officer wants to do. It's the worst news to deliver to someone, and it never gets easier. So imagine the policeman in Logopolis drawing straws on who has to inform the relatives of Tegan and her Aunt Vanessa about their encounter with the Master. It's later revealed in the 5th Doctor story The Awakening that Tegan has a grandfather called Andrew, so it's probable that it would be his door that the police arrived at after discovering the shrunken form of Aunt Vanessa in her car. Good evening, sir. We've got some terrible news about your granddaughter and her Aunt Vanessa. The good news is that your granddaughter Tegan is currently only listed as missing. The bad news is that Vanessa has been shrunken to the size of a doll using some kind of tissue compression eliminator. Now, Andrew would be well within his rights to throw the poor policeman out the front door for delivering such a sick joke to his doorstep. Or perhaps Tegan delivered the news more sensitively to her family once the Doctor finally returned her to Heathrow. Number 2. Donna watching the 2012 Olympics. Not only is Fear Her one of the least loved modern Doctor Who stories, but it also has the power to kill Donna Noble. When the Doctor dropped Donna back on Earth, he left Sylvia and Wilf with a dire warning that Donna must never remember him or their adventures together. To remember these things would cause Donna's mind to burn up, and she would die. It's unclear if the Doctor left Sylvia and Wilf a detailed list of things to avoid, but it might have been wise to do so. Otherwise, the 2012 Olympics could have been a very sad day for the Temple Noble family. Things would already feel strange to Donna when the stadium's crowd suddenly disappeared, as they did when everyone turned into Harold Saxon during Christmas 2009. But the sensation would have only got worse when, after the inhabitants of the stadium were miraculously returned to their seats, a very familiar, very skinny face entered the stadium with the Olympic torch. You can just picture Wilf and Sylvia leaping off the sofa to block the TV so that Donna doesn't register the head-exploding significance of the skinny man lighting the Olympic flame. Number 1. Where's Dan going to live? Dan doesn't get an easy ride in The Power of the Doctor. He's almost blasted into the vacuum of space by a Cyberman, and then upon deciding it's time to go home, he remembers that his house is still tiny. Where's the poor guy gonna live now? It's hardly a punch-the-air victorious ending for the plucky plasterer, is it? He's still not got a job at the museum, he's still skint, he no longer has a house, and he'll have to move in with his mum and dad. At least when the 11th Doctor dropped off Amy and Rory, he brought them a nice house and a fancy car, although that's probably because he still felt guilty about their daughter being turned into a killing machine. All Dan gets is a distracted Doctor awkwardly saying goodbye and a hug from Yaz. Still, he's not alone. Sarah Jane Smith is the best-loved Doctor Who companion of all time, and she got dumped in Aberdeen. At least Dan got taken to his front door, his incredibly tiny front door, but it was still his front door at least. But if we want to look at it on the bright side, as a plasterer and a member of the same support group as Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, he'll surely get a lucrative contract on the renovation of Unit HQ after Tegan and Kate blew it up. And that concludes our list, but if you can think of any other good examples, then please let us know in the comments below. We've had a good laugh coming up with these. While you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell so you never miss a Who Culture video ever again. I've been Ellie with Who Culture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.